We have a tremendous intellectual, insightful, powerful man coming now to share with us. New York Times columnist, author, great books, Fire Shut Up in My Bones, and also the latest, The Devil You Know. So we want to bring on now Mr. Charles M. Blow to continue our conversation. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thank
Thank you.
you. Thank you for having me.
Listen, I could just jump right in to some of the things you've written and you shared in The Devil You Know. And I think I will start there because it's just a natural continuation from some of what Tim shared. But you are particularly, I feel like I'm Mr. Blow, Charles,
Charles is fine.
insightful concerning, Charles is fine, concerning how we shift our thinking about racism. And you say some very powerful things. This is one of the things I wanted to have you expound on as we get started. You said the conclusion I have come to is simply this: racism behaves the way racism behaves. Wow, racism wasn't and isn't geography dependent, but proximity and scale dependent. And you talk about how Black people fled the South thinking they'd get to a place where there was no racism. Can you expound on, for a few minutes, what racism is? Because I believe sometimes we just talk about racism, but people might not know what it is and what it encompasses.
Well, I guess I'll just do it as simply as possible, which is that it is believing that there are traits and characteristics and values that are inherent to the way people look, their skin color, their physical characteristics that correspond to the way that people have come to define race, which is actually a flimsy way of defining anything, but it is the definition that we use, and we imbue those racial categories with actual character and quality metrics.
Thank you so much. And that's a powerful, brief definition that also gets back to the connection to power constructs and the systemic aspects of racism, also the personal, as Tim mentioned. You say in your book that in many facets of culture, whiteness has become aspirational, that basically we center our society on whiteness. Can you share more about that? I believe it's important for people to see that and to understand it, particularly as we talk about solutions.
I mentioned that in the context of talking about how all people who are not white are not always aligned, and that many people are immigrants to the country. They come from other places around the world that also have white supremacy problems. Even if the population doesn't have white people as we define them, you'll often hear people, Latin American people, say, well, I was white in my country. And that is true. Their definition of whiteness was different than what our definition might be. But they still had the white supremacy problem. And what I was describing there was when people come to this country, we like to lump them all in and say non-white will be the majority, non-white vote this way. These are very different groups of people, depending on where they come from on the planet, which country they come from, what their history is in the country from which they come. And they may not have the same goals and aspirations. That in fact, coming to America, where you see white supremacy working so well, where white people have many of the advantages and people who define themselves as not white do not have those advantages, whiteness becomes aspirational for people who can blend.
Wow. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. I'm just, as you're sharing, I'm thinking about all the different um, insights and the useful information. That's what really struck me about your book, um, The Devil You Know, how it's actually things that I could take and apply. You talk about uh, the the state of being outraged and how it can impact us, how we can be outraged and it could not be healthy, and we have to transition to the phase after that or in tandem with that as we, think about Buffalo, and even what's just happened in Texas, Charles, and how there were people tweeting out once they found out the name of the shooter that he's probably an illegal, quote unquote illegal, which is a very inhumane term for a human being. And we could even see the connection between racism and what happened there, and in particular how people respond uh, based on who the assailant or the shooter is. And you talk about how gun violence and what we're seeing now in this country is also a reflection of white supremacy. Even when people ask, what about black on black crime? I don't think they're realizing the connection between some of the poverty we're seeing in our communities and white supremacy, ghetto housing, the things that have happened historically that were intentionally placing black people in positions to not do well.
Well, gun policy has always been linked to race in America.
Mm-hmm.
Tim explained the first about the Second Amendment and how white people wanted to make sure that they control enslaved people. But even after slavery ended with the Emancipation Proclamation and the 14th and 15th Amendments, the Ku Klux Klan rose immediately. And part of its mission was as a gun control organization to make sure that black people did not have guns, to remove and confiscate guns from black people, because white people were terrified that a now armed black free populace would revisit upon them the same horrors that they had visited upon black bodies for hundreds of years. The part of the black codes and convict leasing laws, where people were just rounded up for any and everything, they made unemployment illegal for some black people in some places, but also the carrying of weapons was very often illegal for black people. And so they would be rounded up and taken to convict leasing, which was just a separate second slavery. That traveled forward in America, and people were very much interested in controlling guns when they thought that they might be falling into the hands of black people. In fact, when the Black Panthers showed up in the California State House with guns, everyone, including Republicans, rushed to say, you can't do this. You can't have guns in public places like this. Ronald Reagan signs that bill. It's called the Mumford Act. The NRA did not put up a fight about that because these were black people disturbing white space, and it's white people.
Right.
Once we started to see that a lot of the violence around gun ownership was community violence, that white people kill white people and black people kill black people, people became less afraid of that. But they did what they started to become more afraid of, and this was part of the NRA pitch, and this is part of what Republicans extended for them, was the idea that you were always under threat, that you could be menaced by criminals who were very often black in their minds. You might be menaced by immigrants crossing the border. You might be menaced by a race war or racial replacement. You might even eventually be menaced by your own government. And therefore, you needed more guns, and you needed fewer restrictions on how you could hold and use those guns.
Mm-hmm.
All of gun legislation and gun policy in America is connected to race. It is connected now, and it has always been.
Absolutely. And it's connected. As you're talking, I'm thinking about Dr. King's triple evils that he teaches on racism, militarism, and poverty. This absolute connection between the three, how they work in this cycle and work together to perpetuate each other. So when people start to feel like, oh, I have to protect myself from people coming over the border or from black people or any other people, because I have to keep this white supremacist ideology, I want it to become a reality, which is the way I pitch it. It's just an idea until racism comes and tries to make it a reality. Mm-hmm. What do we do, Charles, as we're looking at what's happening in our country? And Dr. King mentions in his World House chapter, where do we go from here, that racism isn't just an American issue, it's prevalent. Anywhere I travel, Charles, I see how racism and imperialism and colonialism has devastated the world, what we call our world house. What needs to shift in our thinking about racism to help us elevate how we're considering it, to even begin to do the work? I don't think we can even start really a lot of work until we get some of the things that you share in this book clear.
Well, I'll say a couple of things. One is when I talk about racism, I kind of reframe it to talk about anti-blackness.
Mm-hmm.
It's very particular. If I am, everybody can have some sort of racial attitude or preconception about other people.
Correct.
But what plagues the globe is anti-blackness. It is hard to find a society, a modern society on the globe outside the continent of Africa, where people
Not
look different. Some are
anti-black.
darker and some are lighter, and the darker people are not assigned to the lower caste. That
Mm-hmm.
is a global infection of anti-blackness that we have to all recognize. And what is happening now around the globe is you have people moving to the north from the global south. And that is causing everyone in the northern European and in some places Asian parts of the world to panic. We are panicking about it. Europe is panicking about it. The entire politics of Europe have been transformed over the issue of immigration, people coming from from the south north into Europe, and for them, many times those are Muslim people. They're slightly darker, but they're not black as you and I would maybe may define black, but they're darker, and they have a different religion, they have a different culture, and it panics everyone. So we have to understand that this is a global phenomenon where anti-blackness is operational.
Mm.
And that's a beginning. But I also believe, this is just my personal view on this. In my writing, in my work, I do not center white people's evolution. I center the idea of power.
Mm-hmm.
King was very clear about, legislation may not make a man love me, but it can stop him from lynching me.
From lynching me.
That is
Yes.
really important to me. I am interested in not necessarily whether you like me or not. If you evolve on that point, that is for you, actually. You should not want to be ignorant. You should not want to be a racist. You should want to evolve. Do that for you. For me, I want to focus on how do I make a society in which I have a better shot, a fair shot, an equal shot, and my children have a better shot, a fairer shot, and an equal shot. How do I make a society where I don't have to fight the same battle that my parents fought and that their parents fought and that their parents fought? How do I make a society where I do not use so much of my energy trying to educate people who do not want to be educated?
Mm-hmm.
Right? Because time, passion, energy are limited commodities in a life. The more I spend trying to drag somebody out of a cave, the less time I have to spend doing my work, less time I have to spend in my community, less time I have to love my children. I want to spend my time on those things that I love. I want to spend my time on crafting Black excellence as a legacy for myself and my family and my community. I want to make sure that power shifts, even if your opinion doesn't.
Wow. That just reminds me of in this work we do at the King Center of creating a beloved community. Everybody has a part. And I talk to friends all the time who say to me, I don't want to be educating white folks. And I realize that's not their role. That each of us, as I listen to Tim talk, that's his role. You are saying, that's not my thing. I'm not going to be out here doing that. And what we have to realize is all of this is happening and it's all needed. But if you're not concentrated on increasing power, what you talk about in your book won't happen.
Mm-hmm.
The facilitation, cultivating of power that's needed for Black people in order to advance economically, in order to shift in our families. It's this connection between power, love, and justice that Dr. King talks about, where we have to realize that if we have love without power or power without love, we're not functioning as we should be functioning. What would you share as the thing that you believe is one thing you really are holding on to right now, in addition to what you've already shared, we need to do? If it's a move to the South, which I love, I'm in the South. I've grown up. I'm from Alabama, and I'm always thinking about what can I do in my home state to shift what's happening with Black people economically. I'm from Tuskegee. When I go back there, Charles, I mean, I'm devastated, heartbroken by the economic conditions, the poverty, the violence. We have teenagers dying in the streets in a predominantly Black town. So I have to think there's something that we need to do. What's in us to do? Because Dr. King talked about how even the word Black has been used in an evil way.
Right.
People don't know that, King. A lot of people don't know that, King. But we need to shift even how we're thinking about Blackness in order to even talk about getting rid of racism.
Right.
Would you agree with that? There needs to be a shift in how we consider ourselves to some extent.
Absolutely. And we need to shake off any residue of how other people have seen us and conceived of us. Right. That is, it's actually harder than you might think. It is bigger than you might think because we have been baptized in a culture that devalued Blackness. And that first step into saying, I am not what you say I am is liberating, it is radical, but it is at the end of the day, the most rewarding thing that you can do. To say, I live as I am human being, and therefore nothing can be foreign to me, nothing is beyond me. There's nothing about my race that devalues my being and my humanity. That is a huge kind of unshaking of a miseducation that we have to undertake first. And that, to me, is the first love.
Yes.
Learning to love ourselves as we are, without apology and without explanation.
Listen, you made me want to sing some Whitney Houston right there, Charles. The greatest love of all. We got to believe that. And we have to teach our young people that, to value who we are and what we bring, and just have an innate sense of dignity in ourselves. Thank you so much. It's been so great talking to you. We look forward to having you back, you and Tim and Robin. But thank you for your book. Thank you for what you shared in The Fire Shut Up in My Bones, and in The Devil, we think we're going to another devil, but we wind up in a place and say, no, it's the same devil I know. Thank you for your book. I encourage everyone to get Charles's book. Thank you, sir. Thank you for being with us for this Beloved Community Talks experience.
Thank you.